You're listening to CherryPickin Entertainment.
Throw me the ball and watch what I do with it.
You are now tuned into the CherryPickin podcast with your host, Andre Cherry.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the CherryPickin podcast. I'm your host, Andre Cherry. Thank you for downloading another episode of the show. Earlier this week, the Associated Press released its top 25 preseason college football poll. On this episode, I will share my thoughts on all of the top 25 teams. And what you're about to hear on this episode are my thoughts on each of the teams. This episode incorporates some audio from episodes I previously released this season, in addition to new thoughts on some of the teams I didn't already cover. I want you to ingest this episode as if it's your primer for the upcoming college football season. I truly believe this will be one of the best seasons of college football that we've seen in a long while, and I am so ready for it. I hope you are too. So without further ado, I present to you my preseason top 25 podcast. At number 1, Georgia. The Georgia Bulldogs are number 1 on the AP Top 25 preseason college football poll for the second straight year. The Dogs are coming off a 13-1 record from a season ago, a season in which they fell short of making it to the college football playoffs. This season, it'll be full go for Kirby Smart and his Dogs as they try to navigate a different-looking conference with new additions Texas and Oklahoma in the mix, and a Nick Saban-less Alabama. The time to strike is now if Georgia expects to try and take hold of the conference en route to an SEC championship and eventual playoff spot. The top 2 rushers from a season ago are gone, as is Brock Bowers, who led the team in receiving in 2023 with 714 yards and 6 touchdowns. However, first-team All-American quarterback Carson Beck returns. He threw for 3,941 yards and 24 touchdowns last season. He will be critical to Georgia's success this season. Tough challenges will appear in Week 1 against Clemson, and then a few road trips to Alabama on September 28th, followed by a stop to Texas on October 19th, followed by a trip to Ole Miss on November 9th. Georgia does not have any room for error if it expects to make a deep run this season, but I believe Kirby Smart and his staff will have his boys ready each week of the season. At number 2, Ohio State. The task is simple. Ohio State needs to win a national championship this season, or I think Ryan Day is no longer the head coach in Columbus after this year. It's crazy though, right? Day has amassed a 56 wins to only 8 loss record as head coach at Ohio State, but I would argue many would say his tenure has been pretty unsuccessful. A national title has eluded Day, unlike the coaches who came before him, and his Buckeyes have dropped the last 3 games against Michigan, which frankly is a fireable offense at Ohio State in and of itself. The Buckeyes will reload like they normally do, and while the schedule isn't too terribly tough, there are a few games worth mentioning, including Iowa, at Oregon, and then at Penn State. These will be tough games as they always are, but Ohio State must strike now while the iron is hot and Michigan is down. I'm high on Ohio State wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. I think he's poised for a big season for his Buckeyes. As a sophomore in 2022, Egbuka put up some big numbers, over 1,100 receiving yards and 12 total touchdowns, which was second best on the team next to Marvin Harrison Jr., who was all-world and is now set to have a breakout season in the NFL with the Arizona Cardinals. Last season, Egbuka regressed a bit due to some ankle issues and a surgery which held him out of 3 games last year. He had only 515 yards and 4 touchdowns. However, I believe Egbuka is going to be ready to go this season and will return to his regular form. I expect him to put up over 1,200 receiving yards with at least 15 receiving touchdowns. At number 3, Oregon. The Ducks went 12-2 in 2023. The Ducks have a very favorable Big Ten schedule this season. Dan Lanning is entering his 3rd year in Eugene as the head coach, and he is coming off his best season yet, in which the Ducks went 12-2 and made an appearance in the Pac-12 title game. The first real test for the Ducks doesn't come until October 12th, when Oregon hosts Ohio State, the Ohio State University. The Ducks do travel to Michigan on November 2nd, but I'm expecting the Wolverines to come back down to reality this season. Oregon's final 2 games come on the road at Camp Randall before hosting the Washington Huskies on November 30th. I'm excited to see how Oregon's brand of football translates into Big Ten play. The Ducks had a scoring defense in the top 10 in FBS, with an offense that scored the second most points per game in the country at 44.2 points per game. They lose some firepower on offense, most notably stud quarterback Bo Nix. But I think the Ducks can hang in there with the Ohio States of the world this season. And I honestly think they'll be a team to watch and a team that will compete in the Big Ten this season. At number 4, Texas. Texas will fare well in the SEC this season. Its schedule is favorable and does not include Alabama, LSU, or Ole Miss. Oklahoma will be a tough matchup in the Red River Showdown, but the first real conference test comes on October 19th against Georgia at home. If the Longhorns can hold it together and beat Georgia, I think they can win out the rest of the way. Not to say they won't face tough competition, especially on November 23rd against Kentucky at home, but the Longhorns are deep and are well coached. The team is ready for this moment to play in the SEC and get back to the college football playoffs. The game against Texas A&M on November 30th will also be must-see TV as the former Big 12 rivals finally meet again as SEC rivals. A&M thought they finally got away from Texas, but not so fast. These two teams will be meeting again for the first time since 2011 in a matchup that ended up being a thriller in which Texas got the last laugh over little brother Texas A&M, beating the Aggies 27-25 on a 40-yard field goal as time expired. At number 5, Alabama. It'll be interesting to see how Alabama plays under a new head coach this season. Felt like we collectively got used to seeing Nick Saban on the sideline for the Crimson Tide after all these years. 17 years to be exact. During that time span, his teams helped him amass an impressive 206 wins to only 29 losses record. Bama's schedule is brutal this season with stops at Wisconsin, hosting Georgia, Missouri, a trip to LSU and Oklahoma at the end of the season, and the Iron Bowl matchup against Auburn on November 30th. Head coach Kalen DeBoer has all the right bona fides to be the new head coach in Tuscaloosa, but I will tell you that I absolutely do not envy the position that he is in. There's no way he can live up to the legacy that Saban built. And I'm not saying that he necessarily has to, but Tuscaloosa has gotten so accustomed to winning for 16 seasons. Bama has won at least 10 games each season dating back to 2008 and has seen 7 national championships during that stretch. What happens if they aren't able to match that level of productivity this season? I wish that brother good luck. I don't see a way that Alabama doesn't regress a bit this season. Not to say that they will be awful, but by Alabama's standards, this year will be a bit of a disappointment for everyone who is faithful to that program. At number 6, Ole Miss. Then in the SEC, I think Ole Miss is on the rise. They went 11-2 in 2023. The Mississippi Rebels have a chance to seriously compete in the SEC this season. Lane Kiffin is in his grown man era at Oxford. He's matured quite a bit and settled in with the Rebels, now in his 5th season at the helm. Assuming he completes the full season with Ole Miss, this will be the longest tenured stop that he's had on his head coaching resume, if you can believe that or not. And this season, he's got reason to be excited. He returns 20 starters, including quarterback Jackson Dart, who amassed over 3,300 yards through the air, 23 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions. On defense, Ole Miss's leading playmaker, strong safety Trey Washington returns, who was their leading tackler from a season ago, and also tied for the most interceptions on the team. Ole Miss doesn't have an easy schedule by any stretch, but they should be favored in more games than they aren't. I'm circling the game against LSU on October 12th, followed by Oklahoma and then Georgia on November 9th. The Rebels host OU and the Dogs, but that trip to LSU on October 12th will really dictate where Ole Miss's season goes the rest of the way. Lane Kiffin has a real shot to break through to the upper echelon of the SEC this season. Can he and his Rebels do it? We shall see. From the SEC, we have Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin returns 20 starters, including quarterback Jackson Dart, who amassed over 3,300 yards through the air, 23 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions. The Ole Miss signal caller had the 3rd most passing yards in the SEC, with the 4th most touchdowns thrown in the entire conference. His best performance of last season came against LSU, in which the Ole Miss signal caller threw for 389 yards with 4 touchdowns and 1 touchdown on the ground. He led the Rebels to an impressive 55-49 victory over the 13th ranked Tigers. That same level of effort will be required from Dart if he expects the Rebels to best their 11 wins from a season ago and end up playing in the SEC championship game and earn a spot to the college football playoffs and come home with the Heisman. He's going to have a Heisman-like performance every week in SEC play if they expect Ole Miss to go on this run and be one of the better teams in the SEC and make it to the playoffs. That's just the way it is in the SEC. That is a very extremely tough conference to play in, but there's enough playmakers returning and the experience from Dart, who I believe is a Heisman hopeful. I think Ole Miss will have a great season if it all comes together. I believe that Dart has the talent and the playmakers around him to make a huge impact in college football this season. At number 7, Notre Dame. Expectations are sky high for Notre Dame to reach the playoffs under head coach Marcus Freeman, now in his 3rd season in South Bend. Freeman has been a good coach, winning at least 9 games his first 2 seasons, but if Notre Dame doesn't make the playoffs this season, I feel as if he won't be long for the job, unfortunately. At number 8, Penn State. James Franklin will benefit from having quarterback Drew Allar returning in addition to the top 3 rushers from a season ago. The offensive line will be serviceable, but they lost some experience with players who have gone on to the NFL. I believe from an offensive standpoint, Penn State has the ability to overpower West Virginia, their first matchup of the season. The defense will be anchored by linebacker Kobe King and safety Kevin Winston this season. These 2 guys accounted for 119 tackles in 2023. Penn State has a chance to be 6-0 before they travel to Wisconsin on October 26th. The biggest question is, can the Nittany Lions finish the job in the second half of the season where Ohio State awaits on November 2nd? Whoever wins that game will likely be able to dictate their own future in the Big Ten. At number 9, Michigan. In the Big Ten, I think Michigan will see a slide. They went 15-0 last season. There are some folks who are more optimistic than I am when it comes to how we feel Michigan will fare this season in the Big Ten. I think they are going to struggle a bit this season. The Wolverines lost way too much talent and its former head coach for me to feel otherwise. And when you look at the schedule, it's not going to be easy at all. Texas comes into Ann Arbor in the second week of the season, followed by the Ducks later in the season, and the annual matchup against Ohio State to end the season. I'm not necessarily saying Michigan will be terrible, but to expect the Wolverines to go undefeated or to win the Big Ten, make the playoffs, and then win a national title just doesn't seem realistic this season. It's just not going to be in the cards. I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan saw 4 losses this season if I'm being real. Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, and then they'll most likely lose an upset game against either Minnesota, Illinois, or Michigan State this season. At number 10, Florida State. And I'm taking Florida State is going to see a little bit of a slide. They went 13-1 last season. Head coach Mike Norvell has done yeoman's work for the Florida State program ever since he's been at the controls. He's now entering his 5th season, which is impressive because I remember hearing folks say that Deion was going to come to take his job just a few seasons ago after the Seminoles saw consecutive losing seasons in 2020, the COVID year, and then also in 2021. Since that time, though, FSU has been a winner. These last 2 seasons, Florida State has gone 23-4 and even won the ACC championship last season. They were one of the best teams all year last year, but missed out on the playoffs in dramatic fashion, almost soap opera-like fashion, but we won't get into that right now. However, the question begs, is Florida State officially back? I would love to know the answer, because I'm really curious to see how Norvell does this season after losing quite a bit of talent, including superstar quarterback Jordan Travis. Of course, Norvell hit the portal hard to try to find replacements that can be filled in and plugged in and step up right away, but that's never a guarantee for success. FSU has a tough schedule, traveling to SMU, followed by a matchup against Clemson right after. Florida State also travels to Miami and Notre Dame before the season is officially over and done. With that being said, I think Florida State takes a slide this season and misses out on a 3rd straight 10-win season and a repeat trip to the ACC championship game. At number 11, Missouri. I got to give a lot of credit to head coach Eli Drinkwitz for turning Missouri football around in the right direction, especially after a very impressive 11-2 run last season. Most people love to dunk on Missouri as a team that doesn't really belong in the SEC. But when they go 6-2 in conference play like they did last season, the haters seemingly go quiet. They will stay quiet if Missouri can continue to string together successful seasons like they started last season. I see at least 8 wins on Missouri's schedule this season, but there will be some tough matchups beginning on October 5th at Texas A&M, and then later on at Alabama, followed by Oklahoma, who visits Como for the first time since October 23rd, 2010. The Tigers won that matchup 36-27. Missouri looks loaded on offense this season as quarterback Brady Cook returns in addition to his 3 leading receivers from a season ago, including wide receiver Luther Burden, who caught 86 balls for 1,212 yards and 9 touchdowns. At number 12, Utah. Then we've got Utah, who went 8-5 in 2023. Utah has a tough travel schedule now that they're in the Big 12. Trips to states like Oklahoma, Arizona, Texas, Florida, that will wear on a person. It really does. However, with that being said, I don't think their schedule is impossible. Kyle Whittingham returns for his 20th season as head coach, which is mind-blowing. He's literally the 3rd longest tenured coach in football today, right there with Mike Gundy and right behind Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. Whittingham has been the coach ever since Urban Meyer left to accept the head coaching job at Florida, if that makes you feel old at all. And that was back in 2004, which is crazy. I was in high school still. I'm almost 40 now. I'm a grown man. I'm 40, almost. Anyway, Utah is an experienced team and is fortunate to get the services of quarterback Cameron Rising, who returns after being sidelined all last season. The guy is a stud playmaker, and he was a former Heisman watch list candidate a few seasons ago. I think Utah can run its schedule, but I'm circling its matchup against Oklahoma State on September 21st. I think that'll be the biggest test for the Utes in their new home in the Big 12 this season. At number 13, LSU. Crazy to think that Brian Kelly is now entering his 3rd season in Baton Rouge. He's been successful, winning 10 games in each of his 2 seasons at the helm. This season, while LSU only returns 12 total starters, they may have a good enough roster and favorable schedule to do some damage in the SEC this season. It will be near impossible to replace former Heisman winner quarterback Jaden Daniels and stud wide receiver Malik Neighbors, but I would expect Coach Kelly to have the next men up and ready to go. On the other side of the ball, defenders Major Burns and Greg Penn returned to LSU. These guys led the team in tackles from a season ago. I think if the defense can play at a high level this season, it should take some pressure off of the offense in the first few weeks of the season. Again, LSU's schedule isn't too brutal, but I wouldn't overlook their Week 1 matchup against USC. We'll pause here for a quick break, but when we get back, I'll provide you with my thoughts for the remaining 12 teams on the AP Top 25 College Football Preseason list. Don't go anywhere. The Cherry Pickin' Podcast will be right back.
They don't do it
That's
like
good.
that. Okay, cool.
So who says what?
So I'm
We're
saying
a podcast. You say that?
So I'm saying 5. Beth.
4.
3.
2. 1. Hey there, I'm Dave.
I'm Beth. And I'm Veronica.
And we are the Happy Hour. We're a podcast dedicated to the most decorated NHL franchise of all time, the Montreal Canadiens.
A casual listen by Habs fans for Habs fans.
We have new episodes every week, so have a listen.
Bye.
Bye.
Basketball is back. And with that comes joy, tension, heartbreak, buzzer beaters, and elation. It's time to be courtside for every one of those moments, no matter where your team is playing. Short Court specializes in making replica and custom basketball courts for your home, office, sports cave to decorate your walls with all those memories. If you have a picture, we can recreate it. Featured in the 2021 UniWatch Holiday Gift Guide, short courts are made using real wood. We frame and give them an epoxy finish to protect the new centerpiece of your memorabilia collection. With previous customers including Northern Kentucky University, Southern Utah University, 19-9 Apparel, The Perimeter Podcast with Adam Morrison, and many more celebrating the careers and retirements of their coaches, It's time you visit shortcourts.com for more info and a gallery of our work, or you can send us an email, info@shortcourts.com. Be sure to find us on social media, just search for Short Courts. It's time to bring the home court home.
At number 13, LSU. Crazy to think that Brian Kelly is now entering his third season in Baton Rouge. He's been successful, winning 10 games in each of his 2 seasons at the helm. This season, while LSU only returns 12 total starters, they may have a good enough roster and favorable schedule to do some damage in the SEC this season. It will be near impossible to replace former Heisman winner quarterback Jaden Daniels and stud wide receiver Malik Neighbors, but I would expect Coach Kelly to have the next men up and ready to go. On the other side of the ball, defenders Major Burns and Greg Penn returned to LSU. These guys led the team in tackles from a season ago. I think if the defense can play at a high level this season, it should take some pressure off of the offense in the first few weeks of the season. Again, LSU's schedule isn't too brutal, but I wouldn't overlook their week 1 matchup against USC. At number 14, Clemson. For Clemson, the Tigers are coming off a down season, even though they posted 9 wins last season, which is a great season for most teams. But at Clemson, the bar has been risen dramatically ever since Dabo Swinney has been at the controls. Clemson had posted 12 straight 10-plus win seasons prior to last season. That is ridiculous. 12 straight 10-win seasons. That is crazy. Clemson is going to be a tough out for a lot of teams in the ACC this season. As the team returns a lot of offensive firepower this fall, I think this matchup between Clemson and Georgia is going to be extremely tight and should be a fun game to watch. Regardless of the outcome, these two teams have a great shot of winning their respective conferences this season and may wind up seeing each other again in the playoffs before the season ends. At number 15, Tennessee. I don't want to doubt head coach Josh Heupel and his Tennessee Volunteers this season, but I just don't see them besting their 9-4 record from a season ago. I believe they lost a lot of talent from last season's roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They've also got some tough matchups this year, including a game against NC State in week 2, followed by a trip to Oklahoma State on September 21st. I think the ceiling for this team is 7 wins in 2024, if I'm being honest. At number 16, Oklahoma. Oklahoma didn't get any favors pulled this season. The Sooners' schedule is tough, but it's not to say that OU can't rise to the challenge. First real test will come on September 21st against Tennessee at home, followed by a trip to Auburn the following week. A much-needed bye week arrives before the Sooners hit the road to Texas, Ole Miss, and Missouri in subsequent weeks. Oklahoma gets the pleasure of facing a new-look Alabama team in the second to the last week of the season before ending things with a trip to Baton Rouge. Honestly, if Oklahoma can win 8 games this season, I think that's a really good start for Brett Venables and the Sooners in their new home in the SEC. I think both Oklahoma and Texas will be humbled a bit by the speed of the SEC and the level of physicality in which the SEC teams bring on defense every week. At number 17, Oklahoma State. Then in the Big 12, we've got Oklahoma State, who went 10-4 last season. Oklahoma State has been consistent for the last decade. In that span, they've amassed a 57-33 record, which is second best only behind Oklahoma, who just recently departed for the SEC. Head coach Mike Gundy is entering his 20th season in Stillwater, which is quite impressive. Even more impressive is the fact that he's only had 1 losing season during that entire stretch, which came in his first season as head coach back in 2005. He's had 8 seasons where the Cowboys have eclipsed double-digit wins, and for as kooky and zany as Mike Gundy is, he's definitely written the blueprint for creating a successful program. This season, I think the sky's the limit for Oklahoma State. Its schedule isn't terribly tough on paper, but the Cowboys do hit the road quite a bit. But fortunately, they get Utah at home this season, and almost every player returns this year, with 19 starters coming back for action this fall, including quarterback Alan Bowman and leading Cowboys rusher Ollie Gordon, who rushed for over 1,700 yards and 21 touchdowns a season ago. He won the Big 12 rushing title last season, and no doubt will be a player everyone has their eyes on. It's my prediction that Oklahoma State will see its win total in the double digits again this season, and quite possibly be on their way to a Big 12 championship matchup at the end of the season. From the Big 12, we have Ollie Gordon II from Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State should have a big year this season. It'll help that almost every player returns this year, with 19 starters coming back for action this fall, including leading Cowboys rusher Ollie Gordon II, who rushed for over 1,700 yards and 21 touchdowns a season ago. He won the Big 12 rushing title last season and no doubt will be a player everyone has their eyes on for the Heisman this year. His breakout performance last season earned him first-team All-American honors, as his rushing yards and rushing touchdowns were the best in all of college football. He had 11 games where he rushed for at least 100 yards, of which 2 games of over 200 yards, and 1 game against Cincinnati where Gordon rushed for 315 yards and 4 touchdowns. At number 18, Kansas State. The Kansas State Wildcats are going to be a force on defense this season. Head coach Chris Kleiman returns 8 starters, including the 3 leading tacklers from a season ago, including senior linebacker Austin Moore, who will be an anchor for the defense. The Wildcats' schedule isn't terrible, especially when they get to host Oklahoma State in Manhattan, Kansas this year. The defense will have its work cut out for them when Ollie Gordon and his Cowboys come to town. Last season, the sensational running back posted a $136 on the ground with 1 touchdown. During this matchup this season, I'll also be looking at Wildcats running back DJ Giddens, who is a solid rusher in his own right. Last year, he gained 1,265 yards, which was 5th best in the conference. I think the floor for Kansas State is 6 or 7 wins. However, keep an eye out for the matchup against Colorado on the road on October 12th. I think this game has upset potential written all over it in favor of the Buffs. At number 19, Miami. The Hurricanes are also waiting for their own breakthrough, which may come this season in Mario Cristobal's 3rd year back at his alma mater. Miami's schedule looks good. They have a chance to go on a run in the ACC. The Canes welcome in transfer quarterback Cam Ward to the program, who put up some big numbers for Washington State last season. And now that I say that, Cam Ward, do you remember that movie, The Program? Cam Ward, I believe his name was Cam Ward. He was a player, and I don't even think he had a speaking role. He was just, I remember Ward in the movie, in The Program, with Halle Berry, James Caan, Omar Epps, Christy Swanson. That movie was crazy. I love that movie. One of my favorite movies of all time. Cam Ward was a wide receiver for the Wolves, if I'm remembering that correctly. And I recalled that memory out of nowhere because of the name Cam Ward. And I believe that's what the player's name was. And he was just a wide receiver in the movie, but he wasn't really, he was like an extra, but he didn't have a speaking role. So I just, sorry I had to divert like that, but the memory just popped in my head. That's a great movie, by the way. If you haven't seen it, you should go watch The Program. I love that movie. Anyways, they welcome in quarterback Cam Ward to the program. He put up some big numbers for Washington State last season. I think it'll be an upgrade to former quarterback Tyler Van Dyke, if I'm being for real. Tyler Van Dyke, he was a good quarterback, but he was more interception prone than Ward has been in his early career so far. The top 2 wide receivers for Miami return, which will help Ward settle in quite nicely. And on the other side of the ball, linebacker Francisco Maui Noah returns and will be an anchor of the defense. If Miami is going to break through to the next level, it has to happen this season, and I think Miami pulls off the victory in this matchup and goes on a run in the ACC because they really need it to bring that program back to respectability. In the ACC, we've got Cam Ward, a quarterback from Miami. The Canes welcome in transfer quarterback Cam Ward to the program, who put up some big numbers for Washington State last season. He will be an upgrade to former quarterback Tyler Van Dyke, who was more interception prone than Ward has been early in his career thus far. The top 2 receivers return for Miami, which will help Ward settle in quite nicely. Ward's stats, if you look at them from Washington State, were pretty nice. The signal caller threw for 3,736 yards with 25 touchdowns and only 7 interceptions. Ward's completion percentage at 66.6% and passing yards would have bested any quarterback in the ACC last year, which is crazy to think about. This guy is better than anybody that played last season in the ACC. Ward will provide an immediate spark to the Hurricanes offense, where I expect him to lead this team to new heights under head coach Mario Cristobal, who enters his 3rd year in Coral Gables. With that said, I think Miami is going to do well this season in the ACC. The Hurricanes' schedule on paper is one where I feel Miami could end up being in the ACC championship game. At 20, Texas A&M. It'll be a new-look Texas A&M squad this season with a new head coach on the sideline. The Aggies welcome in former Duke head coach Mike Elko. Elko and his A&M team host Notre Dame in Week 1, and if the former Blue Devils coach can steal a win from the Irish in his first season and his first game for the Aggies, I feel as if that's a huge confidence builder for not only him and his team, but everyone who supports this program. After all, Elko has only been a head coach for 2 full seasons, but he was highly successful at Duke, posting 17 combined wins and knocking off teams such as Miami, Virginia Tech, Clemson, NC State, and Wake Forest during that stretch. Elko's Duke team even played a ranked Notre Dame squad very hard last season, losing that game but remaining within 7 points of victory. I say all that because Elko knows what it'll take to beat Notre Dame, and he arguably has a better roster with Texas A&M with 18 returning starters. I think the Week 1 matchup between A&M and Notre Dame will be very close. It's not inconceivable for me to see A&M winning 8 games this season. At number 21, Arizona. I'm really going to keep my eyes glued to the Arizona team this season. It'll be head coach Brett Brennan's first season at the helm after coming from San Jose State. He'll benefit from having 15 returning starters this season, including his quarterback and top wide receiver. I don't think they'll hit 10 wins this season, but they should be able to go bowling. I am concerned with matchups the Wildcats have on the road at Kansas State on September 13th, followed by a stop at Utah on September 28th, and then BYU, UCF, and TCU at various points this season. It's not going to be easy, but I think Arizona can remain competitive in the Big 12, and they will be one of the teams to watch this season, mark my words. At number 22, Kansas. Can you believe it? Kansas is on the AP Top 25 preseason list for the first time since 2009, which is outstanding for a team that has been a laughingstock in football for the last decade, it's felt like. However, head coach Lance Leipold has come in now in his 4th season and brought a level of respectability to the program. His Jayhawks have gone bowling in each of the last 2 seasons, and the team posted its first 9-win season last year, which isn't something they've done since 2007. I like the direction that this team is headed in and feel like they've got a great chance to win at least 7 games in 2024. The leading rusher and receiver return to Lawrence, which should make quarterback Jalen Daniels' job a lot easier this season. I also want to call out how much I love Kansas's uniforms. I think they've got some of the best helmet jersey combinations in all of college football. I truly believe that. At number 23, USC. Then we've got USC, who went 8-5 in 2023. USC loses a lot of offense this season, including superstar quarterback Caleb Williams, who is now on my Chicago Bears. Thank you very much. But also its top 2 rushers and receivers. It will be a rebuilding year of sorts for head coach Lincoln Riley, who is now entering his 3rd season in Los Angeles. The Trojans opened the season against LSU for non-conference play, but then traveled to Michigan on September 21st. However, USC hosts Wisconsin, Penn State, and Nebraska, who, like I said, should be an improved team. So it's not an easy schedule, but the Trojans do luck out getting Wisconsin and Penn State at home this season. I'd set the over-under at 7 wins this season for USC. At number 24, NC State. NC State is a team that I feel like will be on the rise this season. NC State went 9-4 last season, and we saw a turnaround with NC State right at the point where Steve Smith Sr. called the program out for waiting for basketball season to roll around. This came on ESPN College Game Day on October 28th when he was a guest picker and the Clemson versus NC State game was mentioned, and he said, and I quote, "Clemson has been struggling. They're not the Clemson that we've loved over the years," Smith said, "but NC State, unfortunately, they're waiting for basketball to start," end quote. And this lit a fire in head coach Dave Doran, who is now in his 12th season at NC State. He clapped back with the W and some pointed comments to Steve Smith Sr. after his Wolfpack beat Clemson by a score of 24-17. But after that point, NC State went undefeated the rest of the regular season to finish 9-4. Prior to Steve Smith's comments, NC State was 4-3 and were coming off a very rare and ugly loss to Duke by a score of 3-24, where the offense just didn't show up at all. things seem pretty bleak for the program, but to Doran's credit, he never lost his team. This season, NC State loses a lot of star power on its defense, including stud linebacker and former Benaric Award winner and first-team All-American Peyton Wilson. But there's a lot of excitement in Raleigh right now with the arrival of Coastal Carolina transfer quarterback Grayson McCall on campus. For his career, he's amassed an 88-14 record with over 10,000 passing yards. He's an athletic passer who should also help add an element to the rushing game for the Wolfpack this season. McCall will add some stability to the quarterback position that the Wolfpack haven't seen in years. His addition to the team provides a boost right away. Another call out here is that NC State's schedule is very favorable this season on paper. The toughest test will come on September 21st when State travels to Clemson, which undoubtedly will be a tough game for Clemson as well. The Wolfpack have a real shot to best their 9-4 record from a season ago and hopefully end up in the ACC championship game. And at number 25, Iowa. Kirk Ferentz is now in his 26th season at the program, and he returns a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. Iowa got blessed with an amazing schedule this season. They should be favored in most games this season aside from the game on October 5th at Ohio State. I would be very surprised if the Hawkeyes aren't in serious contention for the Big Ten title game this season. So there we have it. Those are my thoughts for each of the top 25 teams on the AP College Football preseason list. What do you think about my opinions on each of these teams? Looking at the list, I feel like there are some teams on here that are way too high, including Alabama, Notre Dame, Michigan, and Tennessee, for instance. I'm hoping NC State can climb up the ladder this season and hopefully make it into the playoffs. And lastly, teams like Ohio State, Oregon, and Oklahoma State have a chance to make it to the college football playoffs this season. It's going to be a fun season either way, so I'm just eagerly looking forward to the start of the season. Thanks for listening. I hope this gets you ready for college football, and I can't wait to talk to you very soon here. Take care, everyone. Have a good one. College football is almost here. Peace. Thank you again for tuning into my Cherry Pickin' podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe to my show and drop me a rating on Apple Podcasts. All of my digital content can be found at the website CherryPickinSports.com. And if you are looking to interact with me via social media, my Twitter handle is @Cherry_Pickin. That's PICKIN. On my Twitter, you'll also find a link to my blog where I post my weekly college football predictions and analysis. I can also be reached via email at cherrypickinsports@gmail.com. Please feel free to reach out to me regarding what you like about this podcast or about what content you'd like to hear more of on future episodes. I sincerely thank you for your support, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Take care.